What's the end result? In a word, magical. It is the most expansive, transparent, seamless 3D sound bubble with amazing... Hey guys, welcome back for another video. So this is a long one. Timestamps will be down in the description for all the relevant sections. The first minute or two is going to be the intro to tell you what this video is about, who it's for, and what you can expect to get out of it. This is not going to be a talking head video. I'm going to be sitting here talking a lot, but I'm going to show you B-roll and I'm going to walk you through every single step. I have pages of just bullet point notes to go through everything. So first of all, this is about the ASPEQT room correction system by Indy Audio Labs for use on their ACURUS systems, both the MUSE and the Act 4. From here on out, I'm just going to call it ACURUS. Now there are multiple ways to do what I'm going to show you in this video, and every ACURUS dealer is going to have their own set of procedures. I'm just going to run you through how I do it here for free using tools like REW. Now, even if you have no interest in the ASPEQT room correction system, this is still going to be, hopefully, an interesting and educational video for anyone, even if you're not even running a room correction system. Doesn't matter what brand, or just manually putting in whatever controls you have, even if it's a basic receiver with just a couple EQs that you can play with, and maybe some delays. You're going to get something out of this. Now I'm going to try to go through it as fast as I can, but I don't want to skip over or gloss over things. So if you have any kind of experience, you might want to put that on 1.5 playback speed. That's what I would do. First, let's go over what you need to use the ASPEQT system. To use the ASPEQT software, you actually have a lot of options. Completely free, they give you a barcode, and I'll show you when I do it, to install a free virtual mouse app on your phone. And it works fine. There's no problem with it whatsoever. You basically just turn your phone into a touchpad. To use the system, that's all you need. You're just clicking a few things. I prefer to just plug in a mouse. You can either use a wired USB mouse or a wireless. There's one free port on the computer that comes with the ASPEQT kit. So you can plug a mouse in there, or you can plug a hub in and plug in a keyboard as well, or you can use a keyboard that has a built-in trackpad. Whatever you want to do. This is something that is not optional. You do have to have a digital tape measure, a laser rangefinder for measuring very precise distances. We use this to figure out the precise distance between a particular mic in the kit and each speaker. This is being used for determining the in-room delay from each speaker to the mic. So these are dirt cheap. I'll put a link down below. I got this for like 12 bucks on Amazon. Here's the part where we fire up REW. It is a free measurement program, extremely powerful. It can have a steep learning curve. However, I'm going to show you everything you need to know to very quickly set it up, things you only have to do once. I'm going to be showing you on Windows. Mac should be, with the exception of the first install steps, exactly the same. And we're only using the most basic function of the program. It's literally just a few clicks of the mouse that we're going to be doing. I'll take you through it all right now. Now, for those of you that already have REW installed, you can go ahead and skip to the next section. For everyone that doesn't, just go to RoomEQWizard.com. I'll put a link down below. Download and install your appropriate version. Now, I'm installing this fresh on my desktop computer just so I can show you everything that comes up standard and what settings to change. After this is done, I'm going to move back over to my laptop, which I have been upgrading over the years, and I just don't remember what it looks like fresh out of the box. So here's the first launch. You can check this little box to not show the welcome screen again. We need to go into Preferences. Everything looks good on this first page. We're going to go to Cal Files, Calibration Files, and we are going to load one in here for the mic calibration files. Now, on each one of the UMIC ones, there is a printed serial number on it. And all you need to do with that is go to the UMIC 1 product page. Again, I'll put a link down below. Scroll down and type in that serial number here, hit submit, and you can download the calibration file. Find the 90-degree file that you just downloaded. Don't worry about this pop-up. Go to the Analysis tab, and then what we want to do here is under Frequency Response Calculation, change it from No Smoothing to, I'm going to suggest, VAR smoothing, which is variable smoothing. It's going to give a different algorithm to the bass than the high end, and it's simply going to make the chart more readable. If you don't have any smoothing, you're going to see such detail that is not audible. The chart is going to be an absolute mess. Now, you can use other smoothings if you wish. It really depends on what you're doing. For our purposes here, though, and most measurements, VAR smoothing or psychoacoustic is just fine. Either one will work, but this is simply setting the default so you don't have to switch this every time you take a measurement. You can change this on the fly to any measurement you take, so it's not like it's anything permanent. And then go ahead and close your preferences. This is the Windows 11 PC that comes and runs part of ASPEQT. Do not connect this to the internet. Out of the box default, this is completely image just for ASPEQT, and it only connects via its own network to the Raspberry Pi that is also part of the ASPEQT kit. All right, now the fun begins. Now, everything we're going to be doing with REW, this is just a one-time thing. Once we have the magic numbers that we need for our data, we never have to do this setup stuff again. So the first thing you want to do is plug in your USB mic, and you want the mic placed in your main listening position right in the middle of where your head would be, wherever that is. Plug in your HDMI cable into the system and set it to whatever input you have it selected to. Doesn't matter, they're all the same. And just make sure that you actually have the signal coming through your system. And note, if your display, your projector, your TV or whatever is in a mode where it will auto shut off without a signal after a certain amount of time, disable that, because there is going to be a period of 5 to 6 minutes where it will not have signal as part of the process, and you don't want the display turning off accidentally. Now we're going to go in and just set it to the mains plus however many subs you have. Set your overheads to 0, then you can disable all your surrounds, disable your center. I have 2 subs, so now we're set to 2.2. This is going to allow us to do the gain and level matching for the subs, and later on find our best crossover settings and delays and all that kind of good stuff. Turn the volume on your processor to anywhere in the 50s. That's good enough for a good signal to noise ratio. Go ahead and fire up REW and then click on the measure button. And this is going to be the main screen that we're going to be using. We don't have to do much in here. We're going to change a couple settings during a couple sections of this setup. First, up in timing, make sure it's set to use acoustic timing reference. That's going to give us a special chirp before and after each measurement to make sure that every measurement we take can be aligned with the other ones, and that'll give us some useful info about delays later on. Make sure that the output and reference output right now is set to both left and left, and physically on your subs, turn them off because we don't want them playing for this initial test. And then go ahead and click start. This will give us our baseline of just the left-hand speaker. Now, the first time you get a measurement result back, the screen looks kind of funky. Go up here to the top and click All SPL. Now, what I like to do right after a measurement is label it. Just click in here and I just label it left, right, whatever you want to do to keep things straight. Now, go back to measure and change that output from left to right. And now that will give us the right-hand speaker. And this is just to basically verify that everything is set up right. And I'm going to show you how to determine how centered you are. So there's our right. I'm going to just label that real quick. Now, if you click on each of the tabs here, anywhere in the information, down in the bottom, you can see it has a delay number in milliseconds. Now, the left should be really close to 0 because that's our timing reference. And the right should also be really close to 0. If it's not, that means either you've got something funky going on in the speaker or your listening position is way off center or something. That right reference, we're not actually going to be doing anything with that. That's just a quick check. Now we can go ahead and measure the subs. Now, right now, the output is only to the right-hand channel. So all we have to do is physically unplug one of the leads to the right speaker. And now we can turn on one sub at a time, and we'll get each individual sub response measuring the exact same way. So now you can see there are all 4 runs on the screen here, the 2 subs and the 2 speakers. What we want to do first is gain match the subs. If you hover over each one, you can highlight and see the lines a little easier. If you click in the check boxes, you can temporarily turn the lines off. So here's just the 2 subs. What we're looking for is just to get them as close to the same overall level as possible. Now, with the VAR smoothing, it's going to give you a lot of detail here, so it can be a little hard to actually see that kind of average level. What we can do is go up to the graph and go to psychoacoustic, and you have to have whatever panel you want to change to select it on the left so it's highlighted. So I clicked here on sub 1, and then up to graph, psychoacoustic. So that makes it a lot easier to see, the average levels. Now, if you've got one line that's, 5, 10 dB above the other or whatever, use the gain knob on the sub itself to get them even. Now, after you have them about even, turn them both on, go back to measure and change output to left plus right. So it's going to send a normal signal to both channels. Now we need to find where the sub levels are compared to the mains. So go ahead and plug your right main back in, turn all of your subs back on, and let's do another left plus right measurement so it sends a full signal out to everything active. Okay, and then switch that real quick to psychoacoustic. All right, now to see this a little bit easier, click on the 20 to 20,000, and now we can kind of see the subslope versus the mains. So you can see the main average is somewhere right around here, 87 dB or so, and the subs, about 95. That's what you want. You want about a 10 dB average difference between your subs and the mains. Now, that doesn't mean that your final output is going to be 10 dB hotter. This is just setting up the room correction to have that headroom and be able to do whatever it needs to with the EQs and the phase and not run out of juice. So this is a perfect setup right here. If you end up with a flat line, what you want to do is raise the gain on both of your subs, again, keeping them the same, until you reach that 10 point. And of course, if it's too hot, bring them down. But this is perfect. A nice 10 dB spread between the averages, and just eyeball it. It doesn't have to be super close, plus or minus 3 dB doesn't make a difference. There's plenty of room in the system to work with anything in that range. So that's how you gain match and level match to set up for the room correction. And that is good. That's a good thing to do no matter what room correction you're using as a starting point. So now we can very quickly find our best crossover settings. You can do this from the front panel. I'm just showing it here because it's easier on camera to show the web interface. Let's go into the speakers. Let's go into the speakers. First, click on each one of your subs. Now we need to set a setting in here. You'll see this label down here called crossover. This is actually the LFE low pass filter. It should be set to 120. And then we can actually go to the speakers. Let me make sure it's set sub 1 and 2 for that setting. It did. Okay, so they're linked, which they should be. Now click on each of the speakers. Now this is where the actual crossover is set. This is the speaker to sub crossover. This is your bass management. So it actually goes pretty low. Now what you select can be personal preference. Are you going to go 40, 50, 60? Probably not. I mean, that is just massive, massive speakers. Most people are going to be 70, 80, 90, 100, anywhere in there. So what we're going to do is do some sweeps real quick and then compare the crossover region as we change this crossover setting and see which is going to be our best result. Simple as that. So we're going to start off at 80. And now we go back into REW, and we're actually just going to uncheck everything so we get a nice blank page real quick. Now go back into measure and do a sweep. And I'm going to label this 80. All right, now I'm going to go in the front panel, change the crossover on the speakers to 90, and I'm going to do a run, and I'm just going to do one for each of the crossover settings so we can get the data real quick on the screen. So now we've got our 4 runs, or however many you did. And we can click the 10 to 200 down here to get in a better range to see what we're doing. So if you hover over each one of those, you can easily see the differences between them. And you can very quickly rule out the worst performing ones. So 80, that's not giving us the best output. What we're looking for is what sums the best, what gives the highest result without screwing anything up or creating a null somewhere else or a peak somewhere else or anything like that. We're just looking for what gives the best results. And you can change this a little bit if you go under limits, if it helps you see things. So let's set this, for example, to 150 and set this to maybe 50. So then we can see the range that's going to be changing because our crossover here's 80, 90, 100, 110. So this is kind of what we're working with. And you can see that there isn't a lot of difference, but there is difference there. Now you may have a totally different result. You may find that at one of these, you've got a big null or you've got a big peak. So you can very quickly rule out the ones that aren't going to work for you. So we can see that 80, that's definitely lower than the rest. 90, okay, it's up in some, lower in others, not bad. 100, a little bit better than 90, not a whole lot, but nothing bad. We can see it dipping a little bit down up in the upper ranges though. If we look at 110, okay, that dip is very much more pronounced. It also is there, a little bit better there, but I don't like these. So 110 is out. Just looking at them, it's really a toss-up, but I can see that the dips here for 100 are definitely bigger than 90, whereas they're pretty much the same down in there. So 90 it is as the best result possible for the mains to sub crossovers. Now, okay, at this point, you can go ahead and shut down REW. Move your microphone well out of the way. Don't put everything away though. We're going to be using REW one more time at the very end to set our sub delays. And go ahead and disconnect your HDMI. And now we'll start on the ASPEQT system. So I'll show you everything about setting that up. And just a quick note, protect your measurement mics. They are very sensitive. If you were to drop it on the floor, for example, you can throw it completely out of whack. Don't leave it sitting on your boom where kids or pets can knock it over or put it on a counter or anything like that. Just if it's not in use, put it in its box, nice and safe, especially these days where they're stupid expensive to replace. So for this next setup part, it's in no particular order. I'm just going to go through it. We have 4 UMIC 1 measurement mics, same one I used for measuring in REW. We've got 4 mic stands, and they do need to go in a very specific general placement. However, the specifics of where you place these mics makes all the difference in the world for calibration. And I'm going to show you the easiest way to figure that out and get yourself the best possible mic pattern. I've found, in this room at least, the absolute spot-on perfect mic placement. I'll show you. And it very well may work in other rooms as well. Changing this changes your results. That's the point. However, there is one general pattern that we have to follow. We have 4 mics, and they do have to be in a general Z pattern. Mic 1 is always going to be forward and centered. Mic 2 is always going to be on the same horizontal plane, same height, but you can vary the distance between the mics. And of course, you can vary the overall height of both of those. And you can vary the forward and backward spread of them. But they do have to be in a horizontal pattern like this. Mics 3 and 4, similarly, are in the back somewhere. You can vary this way, you can vary height, and you can vary distance between them. But they always have to be even with each other and going this way. So 1 is here, 2 is here, 3 is here, 4 is here. That's the only thing set in stone. That's what the system is expecting, and that's where you have to generally place the mics. Everything else you have to experiment with. So let me set up and show you my best setup, and you can try that first, but definitely try others as well. Now, the only thing important when actually placing the mics is that they are perfectly vertical both ways. Makes absolutely no difference what the spin orientation is. These are omnidirectional, and do not use the pop filters. Those have absolutely nothing to do with use inside. And I strongly recommend that you label the USB-A side of each of your cables, because you are going to be plugging these in and out very frequently, and they have to go in order. And if you have all of these coming to the other end just in one jumbled pile, you end up having to trace and figure out which is which. So the first time you plug all these in, just go ahead and label each one 1, 2, 3, and 4. And believe me, it'll make your life easier. And it is easier also to plug these into the bottom of the mics first before you put them in. They're USB-C on the bottom section. So these are the two computers that come with the kit. This is the Windows PC that'll plug into the unit via HDMI. This is the Raspberry Pi that is doing part of the processing for the filters and such, and where all the microphones plug in. This goes anywhere near your microphones, wherever they are set up, and you just need power coming in through the USB for it. And all you do is plug in the power. It will automatically boot up. Takes a few minutes. This will launch its own Wi-Fi, and the other computer will automatically connect to it. It is a closed system. Neither one is on the internet or your network. It's all self-contained. Plug the HDMI stick into whatever HDMI extension you're using. And then the only other things that come with it in the kit are the, likewise, USB power. That will go in here. There is a power switch. It will default to sleep mode when you plug in the power, and this will actually turn on the computer and start it to boot. And then we have the USB to serial connector cable. This plugs into the serial port on the back of your processor, either the MUSE or the ACT4. Plug this into either one of the USB ports on the computer here. And then what I suggest you use is just a simple USB hub. I've got a 4-port hub here and a dongle for my wireless mouse and keyboard. Set the processor to whatever HDMI input you're using. So the first thing we're going to do is boot the computer. Just press the power button. You'll see this little light go from green to blue as it boots up, and then you'll see the actual Windows computer boots up. This takes a couple minutes. Don't do anything to it. It's completely automated. It'll run through some scripts. You really, besides shutting down the PC, you're never in Windows. You're all self-contained in the ASPEQT program. And then this is the first screen you see pop up. Now it will sit there and automatically look for that Wi-Fi network coming from the Raspberry Pi, and it automatically pops up when it connects. All we're doing for this first round of tests is testing mic positions, and I'll show you all about this in a second. But this is critical because we're going to do a quick 2-channel plus subs test just to get and make sure that our imaging and the 3D space and the reverb and everything isn't being affected. And I'll run through 3 quick songs, just the first 10 seconds of them, and that will instantly tell you if things are right or not. And once you get that set up, just with quick calibrations with 2.x, after that set, you can do a real full calibration with all your speakers. And the reason we're doing this is because it saves a bunch of time only doing a 2.x calibration over and over rather than a 14, 15, 16 channel. All right, first thing we're going to do is click proceed. On this screen, just select your seating arrangement. I'm only calibrating for 1 seat, so that's what I'm going to select. All right, now here's where we have to plug in the mics, and you can see on the screen the general Z pattern that I talked about earlier that they have to stay in, and you want to connect these in order, and this is why I showed you it's important to label the cables. So plug them in one at a time and wait for the green rings to go solid green before going to the next. So now all 4 mics are plugged in. And that'll just sit there. Don't have to do anything else with that until we start a new run, after which we'll be pulling these out and putting them back in. Now back on the main screen, go ahead and click confirm. Here's where you pick your house curve. I happen to prefer the 9 dB slope. Now this does have a slight high-end roll-off, but you can negate that a bit on the next screen by picking your EQ range. The lower EQ limit and the upper EQ limit, this is what part of this do you want the system to try and correct. You want to go as low as possible. 20 is the lower limit. The upper EQ limit, here's where you want to dial this down. Now I'm going to suggest 4, 5, 6 kilohertz, somewhere in that range. And that's because, number one, I want to negate some of the effect of that downward slope, but I want it high enough where it's going to be EQing in dialogue range. Now, this is really cool. On the left-hand side, you see under the reference sound pressure level, the 80 dB you see there is just the default. Maybe you think reference level, and this is all personal opinion, there's multiple ways to look at it. Maybe you think it's 75, maybe you think it's 80, maybe you think it's 85. Guess what? You can determine what reference level is to you. Set it to whatever you like. What that's going to do is set the number 73 on the front panel, the volume display of your processor, to that, to whatever you set it to. 73 is an arbitrary number. The volume gauge on the ACURUS systems is basically like a battery percentage. It goes from 0 to 99. It has nothing to do with dBs. It's just an arbitrary number. 73 is going to be your quote unquote reference level. So I'm just going to set mine to 75. Now the other parameter here is something that you actually have to physically measure. You can either use the digital tape measure or an actual tape measure. But what you need to do is measure the distance from the left main speaker tweeter to the number one mic, wherever it is in your listening position. This is where, like I said, I have run dozens and dozens of test runs to dial this in this room at least. This is mic number one. This is where you're going to measure from for that distance measurement. Just right here at the front of the mic to wherever your left tweeter is, all right? Mic one, mic two, directly to the left. These are at ear level, which is slightly below the top of my headrest. And these are 8 inches apart. In my seat, it happens to be about in the middle of the bolster there, but 8 inches distance left to right. And it is right near the center of the cushion, about where my knees are. But again, experiment. I've played with it this way. I've played with the distances. I played with the heights. This is what I found to work perfectly here. Now in the back, same type of positioning. That one is centered. Actually, I got bumped a little bit there. That is centered, and that is just peaking above the headrest. Now, all of them have direct line to my surrounds. I'm not blocking anything, but that's just helping mitigate the reflection off the back of the headrest. So it's just above it and just hitting my absorption panel there. Likewise with this one over here, and again, 8 inches apart. What I do suggest is that you always space them the same. So if the fronts are 8 inches, if the fronts are positioned one particular way, do the back pair the same, just the opposite direction. Back to the front screen, it's on 10 feet, which is the default. Next, we're going to click Begin Measurement. Now, this begins this countdown process. From here on out, this is where it's completely automated, all the way through calibration. This first part here, it actually takes a little bit longer than 5 minutes, and this is why I said you have to make sure your display, and it gives you a warning here. Is it on the screen? Yeah, I was reading that when it popped off, but I think that screen said the same thing. Make sure your display is set not to power off without a signal for a while, because this is a 5+ minute span where it is going to be off. It takes control of the unit, as you can see right here, and it will automatically reboot it and take over complete control of it. But during this 5 minutes, it's going to be off. So don't think it's not doing anything, and that front panel is actually going to turn itself off in a moment here as well for a few minutes. You might think it's broken. It's not. Just leave it alone. In 5-6 minutes, it'll all come back and start. So this first section is normalization. It's going through and setting all the parameters. It's going to be listening for background noise in a bit, and then it will start the actual calibration process. Now it's going to go through and quickly measure the raw levels coming out of each speaker. The next step here, optimizing trim. This is where it takes that level information and adjusts it up or down to get every speaker in line with the others. And you can see the deltas popping up, which it thinks is correct. And then it remeasures. It does this over and over. Every time it changes a frequency or a phase check or a level trim, it then retests over and over until it no longer has to change anything and you get the perfect results. Now it's going to actually measure the frequency sweeps, and this is where it will pull and start the data process. So once it's done with the sweeps, now it starts crunching the data. It comes up with all the filters that it thinks is going to give you the perfect result, and then it goes through again and rechecks from the beginning. So this whole process has been taking about 20 minutes, 25 minutes or so. So far, it's just about done. After it's finally happy here, we'll have a button to finalize it. And there we go. That is the end of the automated process. So go ahead and click Finish EQ. That will actually transfer all the data to the processor and end the run. Now you're going to see some screens at the end here. They're completely optional. Hit the Windows key on the keyboard and then shut down normally. Now what we're going to do is test our results. We can go over and unplug all the cables from the Raspberry Pi, the mic cables, I should say. If you're going to do another run, you can certainly just leave it powered on. But every time you start a run, you have to plug these in as part of the process. So just get in the habit of unplugging them every time you finish a run. Go ahead and move your mics out of the way because you're going to be sitting right there. Now to check our results, it's going to take us less than a minute. Set your input to whatever input you are using for streaming music. Mine happens to go into 10. Go into speaker mode where it says auto, and we want 2 dot whatever. So that's set. Set volume to whatever you like for a good, comfortable listening position. Quick editing interjection. I forgot to mention at this point, go in the front panel and into your speakers, enter in the crossovers that you selected. And at the end, when you turn on all the rest of your speakers, make sure you do the same for all of those as well. Now there are 3 songs that we're going to be using to check our results. Norah Jones' Little Room. First of all, set these to play through whatever your streamer is, of course. Theater is my Weems streamer. So now we should have sound coming through the system. All right, what you want to listen for in, like I said, the first 5-10 seconds, she should be absolutely centered in your listening position, not centered between the speakers, but centered to you. Should be coming dead center, should be nice and high up in the soundstage. Her head should sound human-sized. This particular track doesn't have any kind of depth, but it's excellent for just quickly determining if the imaging centering got it correct. Go into speakers, into the next screen, into the next screen. You'll see here, global PEQ. Just tap bypass and it turns off all the filters. If you notice a dramatic difference in any of these tests with that bypassed, then the filter screwed something up because of the mic position and you need to try another one. But if you don't notice any difference as far as depth and width and the 3D room reverb and everything, if that's still there, enabled versus bypassed, then you're good. On the next track, Dancing Flute and Drum, this is one where you are going to be checking room reverb. It starts off with a tap of what I'm assuming is a drumstick on the edge of the drum, and it should be very dynamic. It almost makes me jump. If I have it turned up loud enough, the tink, that tink sound, it just, bam, it hits you super fast. It should be coming from around the speaker, but not in the speaker. It's a very distinct difference between a sound locked in the speaker, like it's coming from the tweeter right there. You can just point at the sound. Shouldn't sound like that. It should be in the general vicinity, slightly back, maybe slightly to the side, definitely in there. The key is the reverb in the recording of that tap. It should travel all across the stage and fade as it comes down. And you should hear that reverb until the next tap. There's a few taps. And then you're going to hear a drum hit. Now the drum hit should sound much more like it's in the speaker. It's more localized. That's normal, but it should still have this big, natural 3D reverb into the room. All right. That's all you're testing for in that track. Then the last one is bubbles. Bubbles is a test for the width of the soundstage and the depth. Play the first 20, 30 seconds of it. You should hear sounds emanating from way beyond the speakers. All right. Speakers should disappear. You should hear stuff all in between it, very distinct. You should be able to point to stuff as it's playing. Way out in here, you shouldn't know where the speakers are at all. If you do, if the sound is only coming from between the speakers, or if you can hear everything coming from one or the other speaker, something's not right. Either the physical placement of your speakers or your mic position. All right, so you have to do some more testing. And further in the track, as it starts getting more and more complex, you're going to hear a lot of stuff bouncing, and you should be able to detect layers of stuff front to back slightly. It's not super obvious, but it is obvious if you've heard it and then it's not there. Once you get this dialed in, then go ahead and just set your speaker selection to what it really is. So we'll go in and turn everything back on. Let's see, yep, surrounds, 2 subs, 4 top firing speakers, center, 5.2.4, and do a full calibration and let it run through. There's one more step when we're done. We need to set the delays. So now here we are at the end. You've got your final house curve set up, you've found your best mic position, and you've run your final calibration. Now we just need to find and plug in the appropriate delays into the system. All you need is a digital tape measure. We're going to be using this for everything except the subwoofers. So I will show you with REW how to find the very precise and accurate delay for the subwoofers, because you cannot do it with just measuring distance. And I'll talk about that when we do it. But first, all we have to do is measure each speaker. Set up your microphone for REW right in your listing position, right in between where your head is. So I'm going to be able to aim this and put my laser pointer right on the mic holder there. That's right where my head is going to be. You can also go from the other side. For example, obviously it's easier to hit ceiling speakers by putting this on the mic end and then pointing it at a speaker. And then what I do, where did I put it? Over here. I make up a handy little chart so I can just write down all the numbers. Once you have these magic numbers, you never have to do this again unless you physically change where things are in your. Now, once you have all your distances, I'll put a link down below to an easy online calculator where you can plug in the distance and get the delay in milliseconds. It's like 1.2 or somewhere right around there. And then go ahead and write down the actual millisecond delays for each speaker. Now, for the subwoofers, we have to measure. That's because subwoofers are not like passive speakers. When you get a signal through your passive speaker, it comes in through the amplifier. It's sending the same timed signal to all speakers in your system. It's coming from the same signal source and amplification. Subwoofers, unless you're using passive subwoofers, which almost nobody does, have plate amps built into them. That's what amplifies them. And those always have additional processing just for the signal to pass through the amplifier, even if you're not adding any DSP processing in it. There's still going to be a few milliseconds of delay. So best case scenario, these are going to be delayed a few milliseconds behind your main speakers. But a lot of people have other things in the signal chain as well. For example, I run a mini DSP 2x4 HD because I run EZB-EQ, and I run transducers, and that allows me to split the incoming signal and send it to my transducer amp, which is behind this over here, and it's completely off right now, but that doesn't matter. It's just for measurements. Just the signal passing through the mini DSP box, even if you're not doing anything with it, there's a little bit of delay there. Plus, I have a wireless kit transmitting to the amp back here on the back of the room. That adds some delay. Plus, because I'm running Crosons, I'm running transducers. Any transducers are going to have this need. You also need to add delay to the subs to sync them with the transducers because they don't respond at the same speed. No matter what transducers you have, Aura Sound, Dayton Audio, Butt Kickers, Bass Shakers, Earthquake, Crosons, Homemade, Hover, anything, they all have to be timed correctly. So there's additional delay and everything built into what these subs need. And you can't guess. If it's not dialed in precisely, it doesn't work. You're not going to get phase coupling to the rest of the speakers from the subs. And of course, you have to have everything timed in with the transducers to the subs. Doesn't matter. We can put whatever we want. We can throw anything into the signal chain we want. And we're going to do one simple measurement in REW and find the exact delay that each subwoofer is giving us right now. So we're going to start by turning all the subwoofers off because we need to do an initial bass run of just our left speaker here to get a timing reference. Just like when we did our crossovers, we're going to set output to left, reference output to left. That's going to give us just an isolated timing signal of just the left speaker because we need that zero baseline. Change this to all SPL. Label this one your left. Now do another measurement. We are going to change the output to right. Turn on one sub at a time and measure each sub. And we want to unplug one of the leads to the right speaker so it doesn't play. We don't care about its output. We're just using that right output as our test signal. So now we've got sub 1 and sub 2 delays. Sub 1 is coming in just under 22 and sub 2 just under 19. Let's write those down. Now, those are not the final numbers. Remember, these are relative to that left speaker. So the actual delay measured is the 10 milliseconds for the left speaker plus these. So that becomes 32. And this one becomes 29. Those are not yet the final numbers, though. Because if we look down here at our surrounds, we've got 5 milliseconds for each of those. Well, we can now subtract 5 from everything, so the surrounds become 0, and that leaves us with the actual final numbers, 27 and 25. This is important only in situations like mine, where we do have a lot in the signal chain for the subs, because ACURUS gives us a limit of just 30 milliseconds to play with. So now the surround will become 0, subtract 5 from every other speaker, and we just calculated our final subs. Now the sub numbers will change depending on what curve you're using and your mic positions. So only do that after your final. All the other numbers remain the same. So once you figure these out and you plug them in, you don't have to calculate these again because these aren't moving. So now we take all the magic numbers, the ones that I circled, and put them into the front panel for each speaker. You have to do them one at a time. Select each speaker, and then in the delay, this is where you set it to. 10 is just what it is for default. It doesn't matter what it's set to during a calibration. It takes everything over and blanks all of that out. But 10 is the default after a factory restore. So just go in and set all of your speakers to what you just calculated. And that is the last step. So what's the end result? In a word, magical. It is the most expansive, transparent, seamless 3D sound bubble with amazing clarity and detail that I've never had before, all the way from the bass to the top end. Now, a future video, I'm going to have lots of scene comparisons where you'll be able to play a lot of things that I'm going to talk about locally, and we can compare notes, and you can listen for a lot of the things that I'll detail that I'm now experiencing. That's it. I hope this video has been helpful. Please subscribe, give me a thumbs up, and we'll see you for the next one.